everyone. Welcome to Designing Science, the IndieBio podcast. I'm Arvind Gupta, your host and the founder of IndieBio. I'm here to help share the secrets and tales from the frontiers of biotechnology. IndieBio enables the world's best scientists to build radically innovative companies. This podcast is for you. I'm your host, the founder of IndieBio, Arvind Gupta, and with me is a very special guest, Ursheet Parikh. He is a partner right now at Mayfield Fund, which is a 50-year-old fund here in the Valley. It's been around since the very beginning of venture capital with over $2.7 billion under management. He's also the founder of Store Simple, which was the largest first generation cloud exit to Microsoft, and is currently a leading healthcare investor here in Silicon Valley. So we're going to be talking about a lot of things, including how he ended up going from enterprise IT but into healthcare, and how that is indicative of a broader trend of going from biotech to bio-IT. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you, so thank you so much.
I'm very, very pleased to be here.
Absolutely, great. So let's just start a little bit with your background. I mean, you have a fascinating history, and so you first you emigrated from India to America and to study, and you ended up starting a company. Take us quickly through how you ended up getting to Store Simple, and then how that took you to healthcare.
Sure. I'm going to try and compress 20 years quickly down into 2 minutes. But I came to the US in 1998. Instead of doing the classic grad school at one of the top schools in the Bay Area, ended up picking up a job. A year later, I left that and started a company. It was a software digital asset management company. Raised our Series A, went through getting the product to market, signed a term sheet for a Series B, and then the nuclear winter of 2001 happens, and most of our customers go bankrupt.
Wow. And
that company folds, and I said, okay, now I'm going to learn how to build a company from people who've already done it well before. And I joined a company which has this great pedigree, right? The CEO is a very successful CEO. The board has sold $15 billion, has had $15 billion in exits of just board members. I'm like, this place I'll learn.
Wow.
A year later, that company folds as well. So success in the late 90s didn't mean much. Right. Then I joined a company which was acquired or a spin-in into Cisco, where I saw a business get built. And then I got an opportunity to build a business from 0 to 100 million a quarter for Cisco, which was one of those rare instances they had something like that, where they could do that without spending $1 billion buying something. And it just so happened that by the time I got that business, I was able to drive that business to that. 2008 happened. And the business was still doing great, but I was ready to kind of move on. And now it's a 10-year journey. I think I know how to do a business. I'm going to go start something. And so in 2009, actually just about a month after General Motors became Government Motors, I think a lot of your audience may not even remember how General Motors itself had to be bailed out by the government.
That's actually true, yes.
And that was kind of close to end of days, right? It's 10 years ago. We started Store Simple, and that was a great journey. In 4 years, we went from concept to product, bringing the product to market, product market fit, demonstrating the scalability of the business model with having a handful of salespeople be very successful, creating a category leading company. And in the end, that category itself was not going to be a big standalone category, largely because the way the cloud ecosystem evolved. Initially, it was expected there would be 10, 15, 20 big clouds, and so hybrid would be big. By 2012, it was only Amazon and Microsoft. And Microsoft ended up acquiring the company. For Satya Nadella, it was the largest acquisition before he became CEO. And by the time we were done, it had become one of their most successful acquisitions. So I wanted customers to get promoted for buying the product, of course all the employees and everyone to do well, and then the acquirer to do well as well. So that was the entrepreneurial journey. And now it was, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? And that's the next chapter on which I've said what I thought I could do well is this whole point of think through sort of concept. Once the science is proven out, the tech, and what does it take to actually build that tech into a product that truly delights customers, users find a viable business model behind that, build a culture of something that can be a lasting organization that can scale. And that's the core foundation of a lot of companies. And so I like to do early stage investing. And that's what I get to now sit on the sidelines as a coach and cheer on the quarterbacks.
Yeah, and so you joined Mayfield Fund to do that?
Yes.
And so at Mayfield Fund, you started by doing enterprise, but then shifted pretty quickly into healthcare companies, healthcare IT companies, and then into deep tech healthcare. Tell me a little bit about that journey and some of the things that you saw and why you thought about that as an opportunity area for yourself.
So there were quite a few things that came together. First, Mayfield is a phenomenal platform. This is one of the founding firms of Silicon Valley. This was also the firm that did the early stage rounds, the Series A, B rounds in Amgen, Genentech, Intuitive, Surgical, that category of companies as well. And so I was watching about 6-7 years ago, the Emperor of, actually I think 6 years ago, the Emperor of Maladies show on PBS, and or 5, something like that. Anyway, and I found telling my daughter then, hey, these were Mayfield companies, and it says, okay, that was the 2nd gen at Mayfield. I'm the 4th gen. What is the 6th gen going to talk about? What we're doing? But that was at the tail end of a few other things that had happened. I had some health issues, and I got some pills, and they also had some side effects, and I was asked to take some more pills and some health scares, and in the end I just went cold turkey on the healthcare system and some sense body hacked myself into good health. Lost 50-60 pounds of body fat. I have kept it off, and I felt that it shouldn't have been this hard. And so this whole notion of how this one size fits all care versus kind of what is happening with the very high degree of personalization enabled by everything from cloud, AI, genomics, kind of just presents itself out as interesting opportunities. And so that was one trigger. The platform was the other, and then before I came to Mayfield, I had actually made some investments that sort of made 100 core processors possible, and that got me thinking. Besides ML and AI, what is the next class of problems that become tractable? And computational biology, genomic data management, these things kind of came up, and so I said, was this thing saying, okay, if I have to go and do venture, I clearly know how to do enterprise stuff well, but I'm going to pick a second area to learn. And so that started the journey. The first few years was just meeting lots of people, understanding what I call building a scaffold around a domain. Because when you think of bio or healthcare investing, every little niche is actually a niche which has dedicated funds. You have funds which do sort of on drugs in biotech, and that has been very successful. Right. But you have devices, you have tools, you have health IT in itself, you have consumer health, you have private equity doing a whole bunch of healthcare services, clinics, things like that. And this is just touching the surface, right? And so the combined sector is getting close to 20% of our economy, but it's also a big personal sense of mission on values, and it's very relevant in this day and age. The raw data is showing that since 1970, the average cost for employers to compensate employees has gone up 60%. If that was all going to employees, then people's wages in real terms on average should be up by 60%. Right. But in reality, they are flat to down because that whole increase has gone into the cost of healthcare.
That's incredible.
And now we overlay that with the fact that the primary driver for social mobility is education, and that cost has gone up even more.
Right.
You add the income inequality, and you have a big part of the country that feels that they are, that they are not going anywhere, and if anything else, educated people coming from elsewhere are actually cutting in the front of the line.
Right.
And that kind of creates a certain political environment where rather than fix the core of the problem. So actually the cost of healthcare is at the core of, the values and the threat to the values to America. But one has to argue that, as an economy itself gets older, richer, shouldn't people spend more on health and wellness? Absolutely. But guess what? Even though US is now spending more in the cost of healthcare than anywhere else, right? It's like twice, on a per capita basis compared to most developed countries. Our outcomes are actually declining. Right? We are finally seeing we are actually seeing the average age beginning to decline.
Yeah, the life expectancy just went down by a year or two.
Correct. And so I think the crux of the problem in all of this is that our healthcare efficiency has been declining. And I think that, and so this biggest threat to America, which is not, well, I wouldn't call it the cost of healthcare, but it is basically the declining efficiency, is I think the biggest entrepreneurial opportunity, because the system that has created this is not the one that is going to go fix it. Nobody in the existing ecosystem comes up and says, I'm going to reduce your cost by half, or I'm going to give you twice the wellness for the same cost tomorrow.
Right.
That's what I think the next generation of entrepreneurs will do. And doing so is going to require people to innovate not just on their products, but really think about company building,
Right.
Such that they can actually have an organization that can grow to be large enough in revenues to realize that mission. Because if they become a part of any of the existing companies in the ecosystem, their mission is going to become just subsumed
Right.
into the existing sort of organization. So you have to be able to work with the existing organizations, but you have to find a way to stay independent and grow
Right.
to kind of realize your mission.
Amazing. And so that, I mean, you said a lot of pretty profound things there in just a few minutes. I mean, one thing that struck me right away was you had to quit the healthcare system in order to heal yourself. I mean, that's remarkable. Alongside, you have healthcare costs rising by 60%, being completely taken by the income of the average American worker, which again has led to the sort of political climate that we're in. I mean, that's remarkable. I'm not sure how many people have really understood or made those connections. I think it's incredibly insightful.
So this actually comes from the St. Louis Fed. So right, I think in an opinion, in a world right now where a lot of opinion is stated as facts and facts get lost, right? This is these are just facts that I'm basically kind of sharing back out around on that.
Yeah, it's incredible. And so what we end up with is this bloated, inefficient system, healthcare system, in which internal disruption is not going to happen because the different parts of that system are too protected or intertwined in order to be able to disrupt it. So we need outside innovation. And I think one of the things that you were saying earlier that really is probably the most interesting ideas I've heard in a long time that isn't widely shared is this shift from traditional biotech being let's solve this one problem and sell it into the system versus let's see this problem and build it into a business that could change the system. That's an incredible shift in thinking around how we fund and build innovation within the healthcare system. Tell me a little bit more about, I mean, like that's a truly profound way of thinking.
Yeah.
How has that come through in your investing?
So I think, the business model, so there's two big types of investors around the healthcare ecosystem. There's private equity and there's venture capital. Private equity investors have done very well in healthcare because they have tended to invest in healthcare services, and healthcare is really a service business. And in services, you aim for businesses which are 40-50% gross margin, 10-12% operating margin, and use a lot of leverage and do well out on that end. One of the little bubbles or micro bubbles we see is that right now a lot of venture investing is happening in healthcare services. And venture investing, if you have to kind of provide the top tier venture returns, you really have to have businesses that can grow very fast and show 20, 30, 40 points of operating margin.
Right.
And that is what makes, it's the common link between sort of, this high set of venture returns that have happened, in large public companies. And so on the venture investing side, the only business model that has been proven out repeatedly is actually the biotech business model. So what is the biotech business model? The biotech business model is, to have a fund that basically has depth in a set of disease areas, to find people around that disease area, understand the biology, and then sort of fund a research project in private land with taking on some science risk, doing a bunch of clinical trials, getting data, and then doing a biz dev deal to sell that asset. Right? It's essentially a project that is acquired and sold. And given that we've had 4 $10 billion exits in the last 2 years on that, that's a great model, and a lot of investors. So if you're a biotech investor, you want to continue doing that, right? Why do you want to kind of go change anything else? Right. And for what it's worth, there's a lot of non-biotech investors who want to kind of go do that because they look at that.
That's right.
But at this point in time, we are living in this really amazing intersection. First, you have this whole, consumerization of healthcare from an expectations perspective that has happened. then you have all this amazing innovation that is happening around ML, cloud, mobile, genomics, computational biology, right? And now you want to build products and solutions, and these are going to be not just pills that you sell. These can be everything from sort of digital therapeutics to new class of devices, precision sort of platforms, things on the brain, longevity. I mean, there's just so much other stuff that is out over here on health and wellness. And if these things have to sort of be realized, then as an entrepreneur, you have to recognize that this area of entrepreneurship is harder than anywhere else, because you're going to need to do 4 things simultaneously as a team. That is just, any one of them usually will make you great entrepreneurs elsewhere, right? You have to first solve a hard problem, which has an inherent barrier to entry, either with a data, network, or IP effect. You have to really know who your user is going to be, right? Is it a consumer, a doctor, a nurse, a clinician, researcher, whoever, and really become something that helps them do their jobs very, very well. Engage them on a sustained basis, not gamified basis,
right.
not something that tapers down. But at the same time, your user in this ecosystem is rarely the person who pays for your product. Your product's typically paid for, sometimes by the user, but more often than not by some organization. And so you have to be also thinking through what is going to be the scalable business model that allows you to own your own sales team or go-to-market motion, so that you kind of get paid. And then finally, any little sector of this is actually large and very crowded. If you just go to the simple healthcare IT software conference called HIMSS, it's actually bigger than the largest Amazon cloud computing conference, reInvent, right? And so you have to be able to sort of create a movement where you run an industry conversation with many of the key stakeholders, including some of the large incumbents. Get the lighthouse customers on board, get the best employees, right? Find your investors, right? You really have to kind of create this platform that everybody wants to join. And when you do all of that, then you can actually get your product to market, build a business, control your destiny, because you are now building and creating a real business with real revenues. So you don't have to sell your business to somebody else,
right,
and subsume, or essentially become part of their mission out on that end.
Right.
And that's how sort of company building and investing becomes different than what I refer to as bio IT, because there's a lot of this innovation. What it has in common is, computing and electrical engineering innovation, comparing with sort of life sciences, bio, and then also behavioral sciences innovation, all sort of tying together in some combination around those companies. But that's and that's the one thing that we know how to do well, right? At Mayfield, myself, we know how to kind of go ahead and, once the science is proved out, how do we take that and make that into sort of deep engineering, deep tech products? What kind of companies and cultures sort of then go, right? How do you as founders scale up to build this movement and build a business that is essentially a lasting institution?
Yeah, right. I mean, it is incredible, because it is a big shift, and these are all incredibly difficult. We've seen it ourselves, where just the payer, who's the payer question is enough to kill many companies that would normally be fantastic. Products that provide genuine value. Mental health comes to mind for us, where the payer is actually in the end of pharma, even though you're providing clinical trials batching service for cancer patients.
Correct.
Right? So, and that company would have died if they didn't figure that out soon enough. So, you've invested in Zapongo and Qventus and Mission Bio, Mammoth most recently, which was, you led that round, as radically oversubscribed. I remember that. So what is there an overarching theme that you're seeing across your investing, or is it more of a sequential learning where you're evolving a thesis? Tell me what drives your decision making a little bit more.
So actually what is really driving is, it's precision everything. And so, the 4 companies you name, but we also have others in our portfolio like Tono and HealthTap.
Sure, absolutely.
And so what do I mean, and why precision is actually the biggest opportunity for entrepreneurs, right? And so on one hand, we can sort of talk about how the healthcare ecosystem is bloated, but I mean, if you have to solve a problem, you just can't say, I'm going to go solve the whole problem. You've got to take parts of the problem and solve it. When you zoom into the ecosystem, you find that each of the various entities in the ecosystem actually want efficiency. You know, 80% of the hospitals in the US are actually government or nonprofits, right? Most people are still shocked by the fact and won't acknowledge. I mean, that's actually the reality, and they run on razor thin margins.
80%.
80%.
Wow.
Right. And they want to, and they're all, I mean, they're mission-driven organizations. They came into it to do it, but just the way the bureaucracy and the system is set up is so hard. But if they can, so Qventus is an example of how it tells a doctor or a nurse what they may need to do the moment they need to do it, and persuades them to take action. And when that happens, patient falls go down, right? El Camino Hospital found a 40% reduction in patient falls. The hospital throughput goes up, right? Like New York Presbyterian actually found that they were able to reduce their length of stay by 10 or 15%, which is a phenomenal number because that translates into hundreds of millions of dollars saved for just that one health system with a product like that. And this is a big example of how AI applied into healthcare in the intelligent augmentation model. It's become basically this leading company. But it starts out with really sort of having this precision view around every patient in this whole system, exactly where they are. What does the organization's need? How do you improve patient flow? How do you improve clinical operations? And then making this specific recommendation and persuading people to take action, right? So it's this precision platform for hospitals.
Right.
You know, if you take Zipongo, it is about sort of precision wellness, right? It's like, you know, one size fits all doesn't work as well on nutrition, and so how do you kind of go ahead and personalize it out? People make hundreds of food decisions a day. So can you have this concierge that goes ahead and solves that out? Mission Bio is in precision genomics. So for example, you know, the mutation that kills you in cancer is actually not the dominant mutation early on. But that, and so what Mission Bio does is it actually looks at, you know, the sequencing data, but modifies the way sequencing is done to sort of actually tell you these are the concurrent mutations that are occurring simultaneously within a cell, which basically means that, you know, you can actually prescribe a different set of medications right in the beginning that would have very high likelihood of preventing relapse. So that's an example of this precision genomics kind of part of the platform, right? Mammoth is essentially the same thing around diagnostics. It is able to go ahead and use CRISPR to detect any nucleic acid so that you can create a very consumer-friendly paper-based test for practically any disease condition. And this is just a black and white thing. And so, but I mean, we can go into other parts of the ecosystem, right? In pharma companies are spending billions of dollars to get a drug to market. They want more efficiency if they can kind of go. If you can have a set of, you know, bioinformatics and genomics technologies that can help them actually improve their yield on what comes to market, you know, that is going to be a big impact item. So even the payers, right? They don't want to be holding the bag. So if they are able to help out on wellness, so it's about how you tie these things together, where within each of the local maxima people want sort of that precision, you know, for efficiency. If we can deliver that, that's a great first step from an entrepreneurial perspective. And then over time, you can reinvent parts of that ecosystem to kind of become very large companies.
So precision everything. I mean, it's a great way to put it, and clearly it's woven through your investment portfolio. And really, when you start to, you know, N of one has been a batted around holy grail of pharma, of biopharma, where the total population size for this one drug is you, and it's so perfectly, you know, made for just your biology. When we really think about that, right, it requires the disruption of everything. The FDA process. It requires the disruption of what's the business model around it, like you're saying. When we start thinking about healthcare as purely precision, everything has to change. How do you see this change happening? I mean, when you project out 30 years and precision has driven all of this change, where do you think, I mean, what do you think some of the biggest changes that we'll see are going to be in?
I think, you know, so first, right, like as an entrepreneur, why do you want to take the hardest problem and kind of solve it first, right? So I think precision diagnostics and some of these things will kind of happen sooner. I think, you know, what we call as N of one on sort of precision medicine, you know, could actually even be like, get me precision diagnostic. And then once I've done the precision diagnostic, if I'm finding that I'm in a set of rare diseases, right, the therapies for those rare diseases is probably a great entrepreneurial opportunity, because if you can have a platform that can create, you know, 50, 100 of those rare disease therapies, right, then first, rare disease therapies have a faster route to market on all of the approvals. You can actually have more partnerships. more collaborations. The more of those you have, the more likely it is that your platform will get proven out to be successful.
That's right.
And so I think it's going to be stuff like that that kind of comes to be. I definitely am a believer that 30 years from now we will be spending more on health and wellness than we are doing right now worldwide. Right? I don't think
so that's going to go up.
It is going to go up. It is going to go up. What
I
think we will get is we will just get a lot more in terms of bang out the buck. We'll get a lot more health and a lot more wellness.
That's great.
And well-being, and it is because once a lot of the basic needs are met, people want to kind of live longer. People want to live healthier, happier lives, and that's what they want to be able to kind of go ahead and spend. And I think it'll be easier to actually spend. Like, you know, you hear lots of stories of how it takes people such a long time to figure out what's wrong with them. You take, you know, and so I think we will just generally be, you know, we'll see a certain level of engineering approaches coming into sort of life sciences and healthcare and medicine, and I think that will, you know, just be, you know, better for how, you know, it'll just create better outcomes for everyone.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially when you start thinking about precision diagnostics being able to lead to FDA pathways that stratify much better. And we know that stratified clinical trial approaches lead to better outcomes because you can control for more variables. So it's going to rest on the diagnostic side and the biomarker side. And you know, along those lines, I think one of the things we've seen, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is this sort of move from enterprise health to consumer health being driven through better biomarkers that are being served rather than to the physician, but directly to the consumer. And I think like Zipango, Omada Health, and Verta Health, you know, companies like that are really taking that to heart to drive behavior change in ways that have never been done before. Where do you think, you know, do you think we'll be getting or healthcare will be getting disrupted in that way as well, from a enterprise to consumer point of view, and where's the line on that?
So I think the first is healthcare has used a different bar on what it defines as consumer experience and engagement, and that just needs to be thrown out of the water, right? So when I look at something like Zipango, that's an example of a company whose sustained user engagement, so cohort a year in, is seeing retention and engagement comparable to Snapchat and Twitter.
Wow.
And approaching Instagram, right? Amazing. In contrast, most stuff in digital health, you know, 90% of the people stop using it within 90 days, right?
And for the audience, what does Zipango do?
So Zipango makes it easy for people to eat well by basically providing personalized nutrition. It's like a virtual dietitian system that not only sort of recommends what you may want to eat, but based on where you are, actually gets it for you. So if you are in the cafeteria, recommend something, gets meal kits, stuff delivered to you, you know, things like that. You know, there's quite, so the point being that, like, you know, if you compared something like Fitbit, right, that is an example of how, you know, when you don't have sustained usage, right, when a large portion of your user base stops using your product. So I think the consumerization, so the other big trend that has happened is consumer out-of-pocket payments has actually become one of the largest sources of reimbursements. Largest sources of spend in the healthcare ecosystem.
Out of pocket.
So if you look at out of pocket, so if you look at the overall healthcare ecosystem, the government is still the largest spender, right? Between all the government programs in Medicare, Medicaid, and VA, all of that stuff like that, they still account for, you know, between, around 35-40% of total spend. But, you know, of the remaining 60%, the portion that employees are paying has now become the largest single component component in the. And so there is a certain demand for people to then kind of take charge. And that's great because, you know, we've long wondered why isn't the healthcare experience as good as the rest of the economy. And now you're seeing so many more of these new healthcare, everything from primary care services to telemed services to online pharmacies, and so all of these things is going to get enabled out on that end. Right. And some of these and you're seeing, right, the largest tech companies have become the biggest sort of innovation engines, right? Everybody from Amazon to Google,
right?
You know, them getting involved, and so I think healthcare is just going to get fused into the tech economy. And
PillPack is a great example of that already.
Correct, very much so.
Yeah. Okay, and so, you know, is there certain areas of human healthcare besides precision, everything, that you see that you're wishing more entrepreneurs were working on, that you feel is underserved?
I think there are so many entrepreneurs that are working in sort of so many areas, right? That I think I mean, I do think that, what is happening with regard, so I think cancer, we are in like inning 6 or 7, or maybe inning 4 or 5 of a 9-inning sort of game. When it comes to brain and the neuro and understanding that, and then sort of everything from the full spectrum of sort of mental health and wellness on a sustained basis through actually the human computing sort of interfaces extending to the brain, to more importantly having an understanding of the brain from a therapeutic and diagnostic perspective. Everything from, like, I mean, it takes years for somebody to actually get the right autism diagnosis right now. It's to, like, we are nowhere in the near sight for good therapies for things like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. So I think that is one where I feel that I wish there was things that were happening, but also they were happening in a manner where you could actually have the product or the solution itself innovating enough on how you can bring things to market faster. Because if it is going to be very, very long drawn out stuff, then those opportunities become better and better for larger companies than for emerging companies, right?
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, one of the things that I'm still very interested and excited by what you were saying is building companies rather than building assets to sell, right? And so biopharma has a very deep tradition of building assets to sell. As a matter of fact, there's a term for it called build to buy, where pharma will say, we want this indication solved or whatever, and if we'll pay this much for it, right? So literally build it and we'll buy it.
But it's not even for the asset in the end. It's just for an intermediate milestone for the data, right? It's really, get me this data and I'll pay for it.
That's right. So what's it like to build actual drugs? Or do drugs go away in a sense, where we understand the underlying so well that instead of symptomatic cures, we're looking at complete cures? And then is there a business model for a one-time therapy that has huge upfront development costs, and yet it's a cure? Is curing people sustainable?
So clearly we are working on fundamental cures, right? I think everything that is happening with CRISPR is creating, great opportunities to kind of go do that. Clearly in our existing sort of ecosystem, we've also seen this point of, there's more than 50 therapies that a few approved, but others under approval, which when they come to market will actually be priced at $500,000 or $1 million a person. I actually am not averse to that kind of pricing, and not because I think it's not price gouging, or it is, but I think if we really, if there is the therapy which is going to save someone's life, right, and you have essentially a model where you are using that exactly for that person, then I think the overall ecosystem's wellness and health quotient will sort of go up. And this is where having sort of precision wellness early enough, helping people stay healthy longer, right? Couple that with the fact that you actually have this better diagnosis, right? So that that kind of a treatment is going to the people who actually need it, right? And then yes, you are actually not just addressing the symptom, but truly curing people out on that end. I think that's great. So I'm not worried at all about like, if you cure someone, right? Are you really sort of reducing your number of customers because you might kind of go out of business out of that? And I think we are so far from every part in the ecosystem from that kind of. The interesting thing about healthcare, it's the only market where supply drives demand, which is if I have a new therapy, there was no demand for it before that, but now there's there. If I'm a hospital and I get this new diagnostic equipment or this new radiology thing, in the past I was doing only CAT scans. I'm doing CAT scans and MRIs, right? It's really interesting, but like the more innovation that happens, it exhibits this behavior of supply driving demand.
It's accretive to the marketplace rather than
but in most places, right, it's like if you have more supply, right, and the demand's kind of staying constant, then the price is going to go down. Here you don't see a lot of that work in this ecosystem, right? Because like the new drug, the new therapy, the new diagnostic, now people want to use it more. and consume more of healthcare.
Yeah, and I think it's forced innovation, right? A standard of care is a bar that's set by a new drug being significantly better than the drug it replaced, right?
Yeah.
And then that becomes a new standard of care, and the old one is actually what gets kind of phased out from a demand side, right? And so that, I guess, the price curve, right? The new drug takes over the old drug, or when it goes to generic, right? That's what happens. I think, it's going to be really interesting to see how precision wellness changes the healthcare system. I think I personally, I had a company in the not precision wellness space, but wellness space around fitness. I learned how hard it is to get behavior to change. Right?
Oh yeah,
it's incredible. I think
Yeah.
Maybe impossible. It's you gotta. I don't think you can. I haven't seen a way to help people change their behavior if they don't want it to be changed.
So I think we've had the smartest minds for a generation focus on how to get people to click the like button and click. I mean, these are not behaviors that people wanted to do. They just started wanting to do, right?
That's right.
But the gamification and that part of it aside, so I think there are companies that are finding a way to make it easy. So the best way to sort of get is if you kind of make it easy for people to do things, bring a certain level of convenience. That kind of helps new habits, sort of overall control or influence or nudge that digital environment. I really think that if eating well is easy, that people would do it. Exercise more is easy, people will do it. But let's take that, right? What is eating well for one person is a very different recipe for another person. For some people, when you talk to them about healthy eating, it actually stresses them out. They care more about sort of cost and convenience and taste. And so, how do you make it easy for them to get better cost, convenience, and taste? And oh, by the way, they get the better healthy eating along with that, right? Or some people, certain types of exercise are harder. And so, like when you have a spotter built into your exercise equipment, right? Like tonal.
Right.
And some people respond much better to weight training than to cardio. For me, the secret of keeping weight off, all of my previous attempts failed because they were very cardio heavy. And what has worked for me is to actually focus on increasing metabolism and sustaining higher metabolism, which is really happening mainly with weight training, preventing sort of bone loss, bone density loss as it happens with age and all of that stuff like that. And so I think ML in all shapes and forms is going to kind of create these things that make things easy for people. And if we apply it right, you can call me an optimist, but I believe that while it's hard, I think there's a lot of smart people for the first time in a generation that are focusing on sort of health and wellness.
Yeah. Well, you've done it. I mean,
But it should not have been this hard for me, and so and so it clearly needs to be easier.
Yeah. I mean, you said this earlier. Even 50 to 60 pounds you lost over
of body fat.
Of body fat. I mean, of body fat. It's amazing.
So that was over a year.
Over a year.
But I think the harder part, as hard as something sounds like losing weight, right? I mean, the problem is keeping it off, right? That's a lifestyle change. That's a sustained part of it out. And then there's a data which is showing that there's actually a national registry from NIH which tracks long-term dieters. And the data have shown that if people have kept it off for 3 years, then they've typically kept it off for life.
Okay, so there's a door you have to go through.
But at the same time, there are times when you find that there was a new study that came out earlier this year, which spoke about how the percentage of people that are trying to lose weight in the U.S. is actually now going down. While the obesity is at an all-time high, people are giving up. And so it is to your point, right? That kind of stuff is hard.
Yes.
But look at what is happening to all the food companies, right? Everybody from Coke to Pepsi to everyone's basically beginning to figure out how are they going to go do more healthy foods, right? Even the candy companies like Nestle, they just sold off the candy business. You know? And so I think I think consumers are demanding sort of better products.
Yeah, it'll be. Go ahead.
No, and so I think people will figure it out, and we'll figure it out with great business models.
Right. We're entering a new era, I think, of understanding nutrition. I think for the first time, I think we understand that we don't understand nutrition, and all the studies that have been done in the prior 50 years have all been sponsored, and so sugar's good for you, sugar's bad for you, fat's good for you, fat's gonna kill you, right? It's all every single food group has a pro and a con study done for it, and now there's this incredible interest in actually understanding diet and health and wellness and the correlation, and the missing piece in all of that is the person, right? Like going back to the idea of precision. How do you see, or what do you think is going to be the best way to stitch or tie our own biology to these different ways of
correct? So you're also
health?
having all the genomic stuff that is happening, right? You're having all the microbiome stuff, all the exomic stuff, right? So all of these things are getting tied together, and it's clearly creating a lot of information. The crux of why I think this problem now becomes tractable is because I think of this framework of bio-IT as really sort of 4 big steps, right? There is this whole notion of digitize, which is everything from diagnostics. Like now that you're converting, once you digitize it, then you're designing, then you're building solutions, and then you're delivering. And so, but the big enabler is that as this thing starts becoming more and more information, and then you have to basically design and build solutions, there's an immense level of complexity, but we have an amazing tool right now with machine learning and deep learning that is allowing to kind of create this personalized experience for you, right? I mean, it is surreal when you're typing something on Google, how it knows what you might be thinking about even before you realize it out and put it out. And so that is that level of, so the ability to digitize that state, the natural state, the human state, the disease state, all of that stuff like that. Then applying all of this information stuff, and then when it comes to delivering, recognizing human behavior, behavioral sciences, and sort of tying these things together is what is sort of going to be. And who are the people, right? I mean, the American employers carry a lot of the risk, and they are one of the biggest, drivers of innovation around the ecosystem. Medicare, they are one of the biggest drivers of innovation in the ecosystem. Everything ranging from bundle payments to how, as they support a greater population of seniors, right? How do you kind of go ahead and drive more innovative solutions out for them? So I think that's how that. So it's really this digitization, design, build, deliver. I think that framework's going to go ahead
and on the deliver side, I mean, what you're saying is there's a payer question, right? And the standard way of thinking is, okay, the consumer, the person who's actually using or consuming this product, is the payer. But you're saying that oftentimes there's another even bigger stakeholder called Medicare or the insurance company
or the employer
that might be a better customer than even the person, the individual using the product.
Well, I think both of them are customers, but in a different. One is you clearly have to solve the problem for a user, right? And then you have to get paid for solving that problem to a stakeholder that cares for that.
Right.
And at a very macro level in the US ecosystem, and healthcare payments is very much a function of what country in the world you are in, right? If you are in places like India and China, it's a lot less government. In Canada and the UK, it's mostly the government. In the US, 40% government, 40% employers, 20% sort of out of pocket on the premium side, and then.
That's right.
But as you have those stakeholders, they are clearly the ones that you have to kind of bring in. That's what I'm saying, right? The top mistake that I see companies in bio-IT making is they end up taking most of the seed money and focusing only on the science, engineering, and product, and not enough on figuring out the true user, the true payer, and demonstrating scalability of the business model to sustain a large standalone company out on that end.
And so how would you, I mean, it's a really great insight. How would you suggest for an early stage company to best start exploring that? I mean, like, how do you call Blue Cross? How would you go about understanding your payer ecosystem? Is there any tricks you found over the years?
So it comes down to what your product is, right? Let's say you give an example of Mendel, right? I mean, that's like, okay, I'm clinical trial, I'm doing patient matching along clinical trials, right? So who really cares about it, right? Clearly the pharma companies, because they want to reduce the cost of sort of trials, right? So they're clearly sort of that customer. So now, who is the person in the pharma company who's in charge of this recruiting, right? What is their experience and process today?
Right.
How do you kind of go work through that, right? they clearly go to the CRO. So is the better solution is the customer than the CRO because the CRO is doing the recruitment, or is it really the pharma buyer? Because for the pharma buyer, just the patient referral alone isn't enough. They need somebody to actually run the trials.
Right.
So is it an AI-powered, better cancer-focused CRO? Is that the company or the product? So it's a conversation or a discussion like that. That kind of is what is needed to sort of be done early on. And so by the time you are coming out to a Series A, you want to know what business you are in, aka who's the customer, who's the user, who's going to pay for it, what does it take to sort of acquire them, and you don't have to have the problem fully solved. But if you are among the best people in the world to kind of go solve the problem, there's enough investors who will be willing to bet on the fact that yes, you will solve the problem, and when it is solved, it is going to be solved for the basis of a big business.
Right. I mean, you consistently have always blown my mind with your ability to take what looks like a pretty interesting and cool business and then say, like, Mendel, is it actually an AI-powered CRO, right? Is it a much bigger industry-shattering company versus an industry-enabling company? And so, to help all the entrepreneurs that are out there, watching this, really, if I was to follow your train of thought there, right? Like thinking about the payer, but then who that final customer is, and then how do you almost replace their value proposition or augment it, rather than how do you sell into them?
Yeah. So it in the end, right, people buy products.
Right, of course.
So you really have to know who you are selling to for that person, what is their top priority, and you actually have to become their top priority, right? So if they're, and if you are solving 10, so there's clearly a persona or a priority for whom you have to kind of go and solve a significant enough chunk of the problem for them to actually make a bet on an emerging company.
Right.
If you are going to solve only part of the problem, if you are just, then your product belongs to some other existing sales force who can just overlay that.
That's right.
But the key to sort of getting velocity in your business model is to sort of have this, I mean, when you talk to whoever your user is going to be, it has to sound like an infomercial, right? They get your product, they get the benefit of it, and they are just raving about it.
Right.
Right. And clearly, not generally speaking, I mean, there'll be exceptions out to that and what becomes good businesses, but overall, sort of having that and then sort of figuring out how that payment thing is going to work. Is at the core of figuring it out, and that goes on to then redefine. You may have a core tech, but what is your whole product?
Sure.
Right. It is that sort of assessment, and then once you have a realization for that, then you have an execution plan where you are less likely to have to do very hard pivots, and more so you're raising the right resources to get to the right milestones, and just looking beyond your nose or beyond the immediate thing. Right. It's like you have a sense on where that big end game will be.
Wow, very cool. I mean, I've seen it in action. It's always been very amazing and impressive. So there's a really systematic way of thinking there that I think will help a lot of people watching. So cool. In the time we have left, I'd love to just chat a little bit about where do you see things going? How do people reach you? And what are some of the things that you're most excited by looking at? I know you talked a little bit about precision everything, but helping people understand where is Mayfield going in all of this?
So how do you reach us? It's first name at Mayfield generally. A lot of us don't. Me personally, I'm not real time on email. When I'm in meetings, people who've been in meetings with me know I'm never doing email.
Yes.
Right? If I'm opening up my laptop to take notes, I'm actually explicitly letting people know I'm doing that.
Right.
So you may not get a real time response, but you'll probably get a response out on that. But at the same time, we also work very closely with folks such as you, right, to kind of help. Because Mayfield mainly does Series A investing, right? And there might be an occasional seed as that happened for Mammoth, but mainly, and at Series A, the question really is, what is the mission you are on? To realize this mission, do you know who your user is, who your payer is? Do you have a sense on what is that whole product that you're going to build? Is the science for it proven out? And there is going to be differences in a whole variety of business models, right? There could be some cases undefined business model, but sometimes there could be, payments, subscriptions, royalties, biz dev deals, spin-offs, right? There could be any range of, like if you're doing therapeutic platform companies,
Right.
JVs are really the business model, right? If you're not going to go sell the
Sure,
asset out,
absolutely,
right? You will still kind of create a bunch of these assets, and you'll end up finding JVs for them. So those, and then how are you really thinking about the building this platform, right? This company where these great people want to be. And so that becomes kind of the common lens, because in the end, the irony is we think people build companies, right? If you go to the Mayfield website, you see our values put up pretty high up there. And that's basically what we live by. We think we're a people-first investor, which means that, and the other thing also is the smartest people typically in the room will be the entrepreneurs.
Sure.
And so while I say, I wish there was more happening on neuro or, some more stuff on longevity and things like that, in the end, it'll kind of come down to people walking in,
right,
and telling us, and then expanding sort of the horizons out on that end. So there have been lots and lots of instances where we may have not had a priority around an area, but then we meet some people around that domain, and within a few weeks get up to speed enough to be able to make a decision towards investing out around that. And as I said, right, our view on healthcare is because we carry such a broad swath, right? In the investing landscape, it's very much a people first model.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to seeing more companies in the Mayfield portfolio, and very excited about what you guys have accomplished so far, what you've accomplished, and where this is going. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming.
My pleasure, and I'm delighted and super optimistic about all the, not only great work that what you've been doing, but just what is happening in the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
And how collectively we're going to end up solving some amazing problems and building some awesome, lasting companies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome, man. Thanks.